All right. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the table. In this episode, we're going to be going over some camera basics and how we apply those to food photography. So let's switch our cameras over into manual mode and get familiar with aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Now these are the three pillars of photography and they need to be balanced in order to create a proper exposure. Now all three can have an impact on the outcome of a photograph, so let's take a deeper look at each setting. First up is aperture. Aperture is the opening in the lens that lets light into the camera body and onto the sensor. The wider the opening, the more light is let in, and vice versa. Now aperture is measured in f-stops or f-numbers, and these numbers are how we determine how wide the opening is when we snap the photo. Low f-stop numbers mean a larger aperture, and higher f-stop numbers mean a smaller aperture, which can kind of be confusing at first, but if we take a look at this graphic, we can see that f1.4 is almost all the way open, while f16 is practically shut. Now aperture can also affect our composition in that it dictates the depth of field. If we use a low f-stop, we can isolate our subject and get a tack sharp focus on it while blurring out the background. Now this is known as a shallow depth of field. And if we use a high f-stop number, we can get all the details in the scene in sharp focus, and this is known as a deep depth of field. It's up to us as the photographer or storyteller to decide which is best for any given scene. Now you can see in this photograph, I've used a low f-stop and isolated the subject and blurred out the background. And in this shot, I used a higher f-stop to get all the details as sharp as possible, like the flowers, the candle, the pastry blender, and you can see how both can be effective. Now there's also an aperture priority mode on most modern digital cameras, and it's usually represented by A or AV on your dial. And what this will do is it allows you to set your desired aperture, and then the camera sensor will determine the best shutter speed and ISO. Next up is shutter speed. Now, shutter speed or exposure time is the length of time that the camera's sensor inside the body is exposed to light. And these numbers are expressed in fractions of a second, like 1/100th means the camera's sensor will be exposed to light for 1/100th of a second. Now, a fast shutter speed can come in handy in food photography when we want to freeze some action, like dusting some pastries with powdered sugar or nailing that syrup pour, catching a perfect cheese pull. You get the idea. But we will mostly be dealing with still life in food photography, so we can usually stick to a slow shutter speed. There is also a shutter priority mode that will determine the best aperture and ISO based on your shutter speed selection. And finally, let's go over ISO. In modern digital cameras, ISO is a camera setting that will brighten or darken your photo after you've taken it. Increasing the ISO number will brighten your photo progressively, which can make it a useful tool in low light situations or when you need a super fast shutter speed and want a wide open aperture to get that depth that we talked about. Now, be cautious when raising the ISO because the higher in ISO numbers you go, the more noise or grain will be introduced into the photograph. Now, sometimes you might want to do that as an artistic choice if you want to go for a rustic or vintage vibe, but in food photography, we mostly want tack sharp focus and a noise-free scene. We can use post to reduce some noise, but that is a destructive process, so again, use caution when doing so. Now, when balancing, your exposure ISO should come in last as it really doesn't have an effect on the exposure. And modern cameras mostly have a base ISO of 100, and we should be shooting with enough artificial or natural light to stick to our camera's base ISO. Now that doesn't mean that we will never have to raise our ISO number. Low light situations almost command that we do. But just remember that higher we go in ISO, the more noise we'll introduce. You'll notice this little meter right here moving around as we make our adjustments. That is the camera's exposure meter, and when the arrow is right in the center, you've got a balanced exposure. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I hope I was able to teach you a little bit something here. Next week, we're going to be going back into the kitchen and I'll be showing you how to make some brioche right at home, and you don't even need a mixer. So go ahead and subscribe and hit that dinner bell for notifications. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.